All right. So Lois, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so thank you all for joining us for the midwinter virtual meeting of the ANSS Anthropology Discussion Group. The co-conveners for our group are myself, Tom Durkin, and Rachel Musket. We are very pleased to introduce John Hawks. He is the Vilas Borghese Distinguished Achievement Professor in the University of Wisconsin-Madison Department of Anthropology. He has been working with a team that has recovered more than 1,200 hominin specimens from the Rising Star Cave system in the Cradle of Humankind in South Africa. He is an expert in population dynamics and the process of natural selection on both genes and morphological traits. His research has shown the potential of open science approaches during his paleoanthropological field research. The Homo Naledi research team published in the journal eLife, which is a peer-reviewed open access scientific journal affiliated with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. He's also a very popular and well-known blogger. He has his own blog, johnhawks.net, where he discusses issues relevant to his research and publishing. And then also, he's well-known for his very large online class that he did through Coursera, Human Evolution, Past and Future. So I'm very happy to turn it over to Dr. Hawks, and I'm just going to mute my mic.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And I'm going to see if I can work the controls here. We'll get there eventually. Okay. Hello. There we go. Now, thank you, everyone, for tuning in to learn a little bit about what I do. And I'd like to explain a bit about the work that we do in South Africa, about the ways that our research is conducted, the ways that we're using resources to engage the public in our work, the ways that we're using open access to disseminate our work, and some of the logistics behind the scenes of how we as a team are interacting worldwide, using resources to connect to each other and connect to the public. So that's my agenda today. To get into it, I'm going to give some background about what our work actually entails, and some of you will know something about this because it's gotten a lot of public attention. And what I'll try to do is to give a behind-the-scenes account of the way that we work together as a team. Okay, so I'm just going to move forward through some slides and give some background about the work that we do. I'm at the University of Wisconsin, but my field work for a number of years has been very deeply engaged in South Africa. And the work that I do is in conjunction with Lee Berger, who is a professor at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa, and also an explorer with the National Geographic Society. And the work that we do is supported by National Geographic, it's supported by the South African National Research Foundation, and it's supported by a number of private foundations and private landowners who are cooperating with us and who help us in the field. The work that we're undertaking right now began in 2013, and the site where we work is called the Rising Star Cave System. The Rising Star Cave System is about 45 minutes drive outside of Johannesburg, South Africa. It's in an area of South Africa that has become known as the Cradle of Humankind. It is presently a World Heritage Site and under UNESCO, and is managed by the World Heritage Authority and also by the South African Heritage Resource Agency. And it's well known as one of the premier fossil areas in the world for finding human relatives, human ancestors, and evidence of the landscape at the time that ancient humans and our ancestors lived. Most of the sites in the Cradle of Humankind area date to between 2.5 million years ago and about 1 million years ago. The fossil site that I'm going to talk about today was discovered in 2013, and it was in a cave system known as the Rising Star Cave this is a cave system that was not known to contain any fossils at the time that our team first found them there, first explored the cave. And they explored under the auspices of looking into a number of caves throughout the cradle area to find additional sites that might have human fossils in them. This site was well known to cavers in the community as a place where they liked to go underground and liked to squeeze through very narrow passages, but no fossils had ever been identified in it. That was the case in September of 2013 when two of our team, Rick Hunter and Steve Tucker, were in this cave system and had found their way to the top of a climb inside the cave called the Dragon's Back. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is our laser survey data from inside the cave, where you can see the contours of parts of the cave system that are the parts that are the key parts of this story. This cave system includes 2 kilometers of passageways underground, but the Dragon's Back and the floor of the Dragon's Back you can see is this irregular sort of jagged climb. The team climbed up to there and in the back of that found that there was a crack that led down into the darkness. They entered that crack, followed it downwards, and it turned into a 40-foot long climb that we call the chute. It's a vertical climb. It is a very narrow crack that they squeeze through to go to that vertical climb. It's 18 centimeters wide at its narrow points. So imagine 7.5 inches, and they're squeezing down through that for 40 feet to reach the bottom. That bottom is called the Naledi chamber. The Naledi chamber was not on any map at the time that our team entered it, but on the floor of this chamber they discovered bones, and those bones were what our team went to investigate in 2013. During the course of a month of underground excavation, our team found more than 1,500 fossil specimens that are attributable to a human relative, and I'll talk a little bit about what we found. This incredibly difficult underground environment demanded that we recruit a very specialized team of researchers to work in it. I do not fit in this underground chamber. Lee doesn't fit. None of the senior people that we had worked with before on sites were able to actually do this work. And so through Facebook, we recruited a team of excavators who, we put out an announcement. We need people to excavate in this site, and you need experience working in archaeological excavations. We are looking for master's, PhD students or professionals, but you have to have underground caving experience to work in this place, and you have to be skinny and preferably small. The team that we recruited included these 6 women, all of whom were PhD students in archaeology from around the world. That included one of our graduate students here at Wisconsin, Aliyah Gertoff, who's second from the left, but a researcher from Australia, a couple from Canada, a number from the United States, recruited from all over the world on the basis of their skills and their ability to work in this. For 1 month in 2013 and for 2 additional weeks in 2014, the team worked underground in the chamber and recovered, you can see some of the work going on here. They recovered in the course of this work 1,500 fossil specimens that are attributable to a human relative. As the bones were being uncovered, it was clear to us on the sort of top side as we were working with the bones that this was something that we didn't expect to have found. We thought that, we could see from photographs taken underground that this was a human relative, that it was not a modern human, it was not a forensic case that we were looking at, but it was, we sort of had an expectation that we would find a partial skeleton of one of the species in South Africa that we already know about, a species like Australopithecus africanus, for example. As these bones came out of the cave, it became clear that the combination of features that we were seeing in different parts of the skeleton were not what we had seen in other sites. And also, it became clear immediately that we were looking at many skeletons. This was not just part of a skeleton, like a Lucy-like situation. This was, in fact, the remains, as we would later discover, of at least 15 individuals commingled together inside of this chamber in an extraordinary situation with no bones of any other kinds of animals. And that's very unusual for these fossil sites. We usually find hominin bones as a minority within the sample that's majority dominated by other species, which are much more common on the landscape. This cave had just the remains of a human relative and one that we hadn't ever seen before. We assembled a team of more than 40 scientists in South Africa in 2014, again, drawn from around the world, including South African scientists, scientists from other parts of Africa, scientists from Europe, from the United States, from Australia, and they all came together to do the first scientific analysis of these fossils in the fossil vault of the University of the Witwatersrand. That project resulted in our finding that this was a new species, a species that had previously not been recognized in the fossil record. To give some context of the importance of this discovery, these are a sample of skeletons from other famous fossil sites. Human evolution is really well documented. In different parts of the world, we have quite a number of fossils of humans and our fossil relatives and ancestors, but mostly those fossils are composed of teeth, jaws, the bones of skulls, and it's very rare for us to find large parts of a skeleton in association. And the importance of this is that the skeleton, of course, every part can potentially tell a story about the way that ancient humans and our relatives lived. And putting together those parts into one skeleton is actually very rare in the fossil record. We're often left with multiple different species living at one place at the same time, and it's very difficult for us to attribute parts of bodies with the bones and teeth that make up their skulls. So we're used to telling stories about the relationships of different hominins based mostly on their teeth. And while the teeth can tell us a lot, the rest of the body has an enormous story to tell. And when we're looking at humans prior to Neanderthals, modern humans and Neanderthals really well represented in the human fossil record, but other species of ancient hominins, this is a sample of what there is. And there aren't a lot more than this. This is the sort of thing that we find extraordinary. And so to have a fossil sample like the Rising Star sample is just amazing. It is a discovery that's unparalleled in the history of our field. To give you a very brief introduction to what Homo Naledi is, I just want to review a few features of it. This is an overview of the skeleton and a view of the bones that make up the different parts of the skeleton on the right, including the many copies of some parts of the skeleton. We're only lacking a few bones out of the entire skeleton in this sample, and for the most part, many bones are represented multiple times. So we know something about the variability of this fossil species. Its brain is about a third the size of a human brain. Here's its skull embedded inside a reconstruction of a human skull to give you some idea. So it's a very small brain. It's approximately the size of a chimpanzee's brain, very slightly larger than that. This is a reconstruction that's done by my friend John Gurgey, who's a paleo artist who specializes in discovering what ancient hominids may have looked like by reconstructing their muscle and skin anatomy. And so some of parts of this are speculative, honestly, but he's an extremely good comparative anatomist. And so the parts that are speculation are based on our best comparison that we have from humans and from other primates. Some of the teeth from the site tell us that we have individuals that are represented who are very young children. So at the upper left here, we have the teeth, upper and lower teeth of about a 2-year-old child. At the bottom right on this screen, we have the upper and lower teeth of an old adult. You can see the teeth are worn nearly completely down to the roots. So here's somebody at the end of their lifespan. We don't know precisely what that means in this species, but in other human species, we think it's likely that they did not live as long a lives as we did, that they're wearing their teeth out by the time they're in their 30s and 40s, and that's probably what we're looking at here. We have every age of child and of adult in between, so we're really representing the entire lifespan. To give some indication of what the teeth look like, I can tell you that these teeth are around the size of human teeth. They're very slightly larger. The back teeth are very slightly larger. The front teeth are very slightly smaller than the teeth in your mouth likely are. They're eating a very human-like diet, to the best of our knowledge. We know now from microwear and from slight chips on these teeth that they're eating foods that are a little bit crunchy and exert a little bit of pitting and scratching on their teeth, and so they're in their landscape choosing some fairly high energy resources to concentrate on, and are doing it in a way that we can trace on their teeth. They're growing in a very human-like pattern in terms of their teeth eruption. Here you see the child's jaw on the left and a slightly older child on the right. The key part about the eruption of the second molar here at the back tooth in the jaw on the right, the eruption of the first molar, which is the one coming in there on the left. Those are things that indicate that their dental eruption sequence is similar to humans. Their feet are basically human feet. They have arches in their feet just like you do, and if they're in a human shoe store, they would be looking for a women's size 4. So this is a very human-like foot and a very human-like way of walking that they have. Their hands are also very human-like. As you can see, their thumb is proportioned with their fingers in very much the way that yours are, but it's a very powerful thumb. You can see that these bones, especially here in the palm of the hand, at the base of the thumb, it's a very powerful, very strong bone, more so than we see in other fossil hominins and their relatives. The fingertips are very broad. Their finger bones, however, are slightly curved, and that indicates to us that they're gripping onto curved objects. Here's one of the bones, one of the hands that we found in situ in the site. They entered this site as bodies, and you can see the hand bones all articulated. These were connected by soft tissue at the time that this entered the site, and we know that the site was formed by bodies entering this cave and becoming disaggregated in the cave where we found them. So an overview, it is a species here on the right that stood about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. That's a bit short compared to humans today and our close relatives like the Turkana boy skeleton. That's the one there on the left that's taller, and an example of Homo erectus. And Lucy's skeleton, the Australopithecus afarensis, which is there on the far left, it's much more ape-like in body size and its anatomy, except that it's an upright walker. Homo naledi, our species that we discovered, is sort of in between in a lot of respects. It's smaller brained than any member of our genus, but at the same time, it seems to be walking in a very human-like way. It seems to have a very human-like manner of carrying its body. It's tall and slender compared to Australopithecus. Its shoulders, however, are canted a bit upwards, and its hands are really well built for climbing, in addition to gripping onto objects as stone tools might have been. So it's got this sort of in-between anatomy. I want to focus on some of the work that we've done since 2013, and then I want to get into some of the methods that we've used for public engagement and how we're working from the site with the public and where that fits into my work. So I just want to tell you that this is an overview of the entire cave system that we have mapped, and I've highlighted 3 areas here. Our entrance that we use to go into the cave is here highlighted in blue. When we run excavations at the site now, we have a command center that we run at the top while our teams are underground. The Dinaledi chamber, where the fossils have come from that I've shown you so far, is highlighted in yellow, and it's in one area of the cave. In 2014, we discovered a second cave chamber, the Lassetti chamber, which also contains remains of Homo Naledi. And that cave chamber is here relatively far separated from the Dinaledi chamber. This is a really unique circumstance that we have two areas of the cave that both contain remains of this fossil species. The Naledi chamber is likewise difficult for our team to reach. Our team has to go through some very difficult twists and turns to get underground. I also do not fit into this cave system, but in this part of the cave, we have discovered the partial skeleton of one individual of Naledi. This skeleton that we've named Neo, you can see that it represents a large part of the upper body. This is our Lucy. This represents all the body parts together in one individual. And the skull of Neo is incredibly well preserved, and I've got a couple slides here that just show you the similarity of the Neo individual with the individuals from the other chamber, just to reemphasize that we're looking at the same thing. Here's Neo's skull on the left, and the Naledi most complete skull on the right, and here's what Neo's skull looks like altogether. This is really extraordinary that we have such a very detailed record. We have, at this point in the second chamber, at least 3 individuals representative of Homo Naledi, including the Neo skeleton. So it is now up to 18 individuals at a minimum inside the cave system. And again, they compare, you know, they're very intermediate between species here at the top that we call Australopithecus and early species of Homo, like Homo habilis, and Homo erectus and modern and archaic humans at the bottom. One of the big mysteries of Naledi is how old was it? And we were not able to determine the age of these fossils until last year. I can tell you that we tested many geological samples from the cave system to try to determine where these fossils fit in the chronology of human evolution. One of the very cool things is that we had a bone sample that is actually embedded in a flowstone. So ancient dripping water has deposited rock inside of the cave around this bone. So we know that the age of this rock that was deposited is younger than the bone. And that gives us a way of bracketing. The bone has to be older than this. In addition to that, we were able to take samples from 3 of the teeth of Homo Naledi, and those teeth, by taking very tiny laser samples, you can see here drilled into the teeth themselves, we were able to test the uranium content and the content of the decay products of uranium in these teeth, and that gave us a way of determining the minimum age of these teeth in terms of uranium absorption from the environment. And then we were able to use a technique called electron spin resonance that works on the principle of high energy radiation from the groundwater is absorbed by teeth and changes their electron energies in a way that's characteristic of the time that they've been buried underground. Altogether, this indicates to us that the fossils are between 236,000 years old and 336,000 years old. So these fossils were deposited inside the Rising Star Cave at around the same time that modern humans were actually evolving and originating inside of Africa. So this is now the biggest and best evidence that we have that our species, when it originated in Africa, was not alone, that there were other species that were there that were strikingly primitive, and those species had existed alongside of our fossil ancestors throughout most of our evolutionary history. So here's a modern human, one of the earliest modern human skulls on the right, compared to the skull of Neo on the left. These are really, really different from each other. And they're different in size, they're different in anatomy, and these fossils existed at around the same time. This archaic human fossil on the left may have existed at around the same time as Homo Naledi on the right. So Africa was home to many different populations of fossil hominins, and we don't know how they interacted or how they survived along with each other. We also don't know precisely how Homo Naledi is connected to our family tree. I've drawn here a tree that shows the different varieties of hominins. Naledi is here, and you can see it's close to the top because it's close to the present compared to a lot of these species. It coexisted with Neanderthals and archaic humans in Africa and the earliest modern humans. But we don't know where it fits into our family tree. We don't know exactly how it's connected to us. Discovering that is going to require understanding how different parts of the skeleton are telling us about this story of relationships. Okay, so that's the work that we've been doing. We were working in the site last year. We will be working there again next month. Starting at the end of February, in fact, our team is underground, working in the Lesedi chamber and in the Dinaledi chamber to recover more evidence of how these chambers accumulated their bones. We're working on the mystery of how these bones entered the site, and it's a big, big problem for us because our best evidence right now suggests that the mechanisms that get bones into caves in other parts of Africa and in other parts of South Africa don't work very well for the Dinaledi bones. It appears that these bones must have been deposited by the deliberate action of Homo Naledi, which, if it's true, would be really, really exceptional. It's the first time, certainly in a primitive species like this, that we've seen evidence of a deliberate deposition of bodies or human remains, and that's really quite amazing. Our team is working in incredibly difficult circumstances underground, and so it's exceptional in light of that I can talk about the way that we use technology underground, the way that that's enabled us actually to increase our outreach from the site. This is Ellen Feuerriegel, who's one of our excavators underground, and I want to show you this picture because she's working here in an area that is literally just as big as her body can fit in. And we're able to get this image and to talk with her in this site because we've run Wi-Fi into the cave, and she's actually talking to us here over her phone. And she's able to communicate with us and from the outside into the outside world just through her telephone, reaching out through the Wi-Fi that we've wired into the cave. We're using, from our command center, a setup that has actually microwave links from our field site into Johannesburg directly to the trunk line that goes sub-Atlantic to the United States. We actually have the best internet in the Johannesburg metropolitan area right here at the site. And it's quite amazing, right? But what it enables us to do is to communicate from our command center above ground down into the cave, talking to our excavators as they're down there. And I want to emphasize that from this point where you see our team here above ground, this is where I'll be stationed when we're underground. From there, it's a half an hour for our team to traverse the cave and to reach the places where they excavate. And their only means of communication with us while they're down there is through the telephone line and through the internet that we've run into the chamber. But from this point, we relay what's going on with them, our communication system directly with them underground and from one chamber to the other is run on Google Hangouts. And so actually, we're able to upload and uplink and connect with anybody in the world through Google Hangouts while we're underground in the cave. All right, so let me just go a bit forward here. And I want to talk about, our engagement strategy, some of the ways that my background comes into this, and some of the ways that we're hitting more broadly than any excavation that's going on at the moment in archaeology, paleoanthropology. All right, so this is Cyril Ramaphosa. He was just this past couple of months promoted to be the new president of the ANC in South Africa. He is likely to be the next president of the country. He is currently the deputy president under Jacob Zuma. This is Ramaphosa at our announcement of Homo Naledi in 2015. You see that engagement from high-level government in South Africa with our project. And they certainly perceive this as being one of the big scientific strengths of their country, is the role of South Africa in human origins and their leadership in human origins. That leadership exercised through the University of the Witwatersrand and its long history in examining fossil sites. Certainly our project, headquartered at Wits University, is part of that tradition, and we take very seriously our links to government at every level. The national government, of course, through the Department of Science and Technology, the provincial government through the Ministry of Tourism, and also which runs the World Heritage Authority, and also through our relationship with landowners and with the provincial government. This site had an enormous public impact when we published our first results in this site. And I can attribute that public impact through multiple channels. First of all, we were able to reach out from the site initially due to the help of National Geographic, but also due to the work here at the University of Wisconsin in filming on the site, sharing very short videos that show the work in progress, blogging from the site. My experience as a blogger came into that and running a project blog, but also getting actually voices from the cavers who were working with us, through the excavators who are working underground, and through the senior scientists who are working at every level of the project, telling people what's going on. That developed a lot of attention on what we were doing, but it also communicated with people, hey, this is how we're doing this work. One of the things that is a big misconception about the kind of work that we do is that bones come out of the ground and it's immediately obvious what they are. And we are just we're digging things up and they tell their story to us. What we were able to do by developing a comprehensive outreach strategy and engagement strategy from the start was to let people know that we don't know what things are when they come out of the ground. And we were able to educate people about the process that we go through in trying to understand what fossil sites are telling us. This is a real mystery. When we first find something, we don't know where it fits. We don't know where it is. And it has been 4 years of work for us to determine how old these fossils are. For many people, that's the big message, right? How old are the fossils is the first thing they want to know. And to educate people, to let them know this is not how we do our science. We first have to try to figure out how this fits and what we're looking at. Then we have to use a series of very detailed comparisons and samples to try to figure out where the chronology is and how they fit into the timeline. That's been something that's been really, really helpful to let people know how we do it. At the public announcement of our fossils, we, for the first time, were able to put on a public exhibition of these fossils at the time of announcement. And here you see school kids who are at the visitor center of the World Heritage Site seeing the fossils on public exhibit for the first time. It was just amazing the engagement that we had from the public. The first time these fossils were exhibited, they were put on display for 1 month after our announcement. They were visited by more than 300,000 people in that month, international visitors, domestic visitors, school kids. They have been on exhibit now for the last year. We revisited this and put them all back on exhibit, and they have had just an incredible uptake. This has been just amazing that the public can see these things. These aren't hidden away in a museum where, in the back room, in the locked vault. These are on display so that everyone can share these. And certainly we've had tremendous just response from the public that they can experience these fossils for themselves and see the story of their discovery for themselves. We published our first research on these fossils in the open access journal eLife, and this was a real break from tradition for us. We have in the past published important fossil discoveries in journals like Science and Nature, and those journals are certainly set up for the kind of major news announcement type papers. In our case, the volume of the discovery and the extreme, international nature of the team involved really encouraged us to do something different and to push a boundary by going into a more open access frame. But also, we had tremendous uptake from the university and from government for doing that. And the reason why is in South Africa, this is, while it is in many ways the most developed country on the African continent, right? So I don't want to overemphasize that there are financial challenges that go with working in Africa. Nonetheless, every dollar that we spend on journal subscriptions, every dollar that we spend on publishing something is a dollar that we're not spending in the local community on researchers, on students, on bursaries for students. And so we think very hard about how to maximize the impact of the research while maximizing its public accessibility. At our announcement in 2015, the Vice Chancellor of Wits University, Adam Habib, shared some comments about the importance of open access for him from the standpoint of an African university. And I love to share these with people because what he had to say was really from the standpoint of the leadership of the university. And for us, working on a scientific project, we think about these things a lot because we want to make sure that our science is having as many impacts on the public as possible. Our science does not cure diseases. What our science has to offer to people is that it tells us about this history that all of us share with each other. And so reaching out to people, getting the public engaged in it is really important to how we see the impact of our work. So to see Dr. Habib saying, we often talk about science as having no boundaries, but in our world, scientific knowledge has been commodified. And too often, what should be the bequest of the world, the bequest of a common humanity, is locked up under paywalls that postgraduate students and researchers cannot get access to. And that's very real. I got to say, I do a lot of my research in South Africa, and the number of times that I'm looking for papers on African genetics or on African fossil sites, and I cannot access them in South Africa. It is just astounding, right? And I work, of course, at the University of Wisconsin. We have an incredible library. We have incredible resources, and the fact is that even with our incredible library, there's stuff that I can't get to when I'm working in South Africa. And that's because, I have to request it, it has to come from, and all of us are in this situation of it's more and more difficult to get access to things, even though the technology allows me to be working in Africa. The fact is that African people cannot get access to these things. So what we did when we made this discovery, he says, was we put cameras in the cave and we streamed it live from day one. We partnered with eLife, an open access journal, to make sure that the discovery was available to all of humanity. And what we did in that practice, we created the first elements of a common global academy. And this, to me, is the most important of his statements. Because from an African point of view, you look at this and you say, well, Africa is looking for handouts, right? They're looking for something, they're looking for the developed world to share with them. And he's saying, no, we're not just looking for you to share your stuff with us. We're going to give the best of our science to the rest of the world. We're giving it to you. We're not just beneficiaries of this. We're the contributors. And to me, that's really, really central. It's that this is coming from everyone, and all of us have to work together. Now, part of that working together is the amount of data release that we've done. This is one of our 3D models of one of the Naledi, this is a thigh bone, and we have released all of the Naledi bones that we've done, all of the scans, on a site called MorphoSource. That site is open to anyone to download. And in fact, people all over the world are downloading fossil models of Naledi. Naledi right now is the most accessible fossil species that exists in human evolution in anthropology. Anyone can download these and anyone can print them on 3D printers. Tom will attest, right? I'm sitting here with prints all over my office, and in fact, we take those prints out everywhere, to schools. Lots of times I'll show up to give a talk and the school has already printed out the fossils. This is really a case where anyone can access these, anyone can download, anyone can replicate any of the work that we've done on the fossils, and they can print these out for their classes, and they're there in education for everyone. This is one of our cavers working from the site. I mentioned that we have the Google Hangout set up, and here we're doing a Google Hangout with school kids in South Africa and in Canada, actually. And you see our caver there explaining what's going on in his little excavation area there. You can see the little trowel and the little dust broom that he's using to sweep up sediment. And he's talking with kids all over the world. This is the kind of public engagement outreach we're able to do from the site. I want to mention, what's the effect of this? Here we've got one of our cavers talking with kids all over the place, right? We did a Facebook Live from the site with our team underground. That Facebook Live hit 40,000 people while it was happening through the National Geographic front page, right? 40,000 people are watching us on Facebook as this is happening, right? As we're doing any kind of outreach engagement from the site, this is being archived. People are showing it in classes after it's happening, right? And the open access papers that we first described Homo Naledi, within 1 year of their publication, they had been downloaded and read 550,000 times. They are some of the most read scientific papers that have ever been published. And this is because they're open access, anyone can get them, and people are using them. They're making all of our, in the papers that we published last year on the new chamber, all of our graphics are made with the reuse in mind. And we're not only releasing our own fossils and the images of them, but in open access form, we're releasing our images of other fossils that are enabling people to show those comparisons in their classrooms. So here's our team, our exploration team. They're in the field now all the time. These guys are all now working for the project. They started as cavers who were doing this as a hobby on weekends. They are now being recruited and working full-time for us as explorers underground. To talk about some of the real production aspects of the project, since 2015, we're now working on more than 550 pages of peer-reviewed research that's appeared on these fossils. We already have nearly 500 citations that have stacked up. We've got more than 100 researchers involved in the project, 30 plus from South Africa, and have been awarded the Team Science Award from the National Research Foundation in South Africa. And we're also tracing the impact this has on people's careers. From the career side, as we began our project, the people who were engaged in it initially, 17 of them were PhD students. At this point, 15 of them have completed their PhDs, and most of them have moved on to postdocs, lectureships, curatorships. Several of them are now assistant professors. Out of the people who were at first lecturers or postdocs, most of them have been promoted or got new assistant professorships. And most of the people who started as early career assistant professors now have tenure. It is really just an amazing series of events. Okay, so that's where I wanted to get to. And what I'd like to do now is open this up for questions. I think that the mechanism of question asking, and I'm going to check with Tom here. We want people to ask questions on the chat function, yeah?
So I think people can ask questions through the chat. I think that, I don't know if Rachel is there, but I think that Rachel was thinking of trying to help coordinate some of the question asking. Rachel, I don't know if you have access to chat, if you'd like to, or if you can turn on your mic. Okay, so it looks like Rachel is saying that she has access to the chat, but it looks like maybe not access to the mic. Okay, so what we can do is we do have access to the chat, and so if people would like to, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, yep. So if people would like to send their questions in through chat, then I'm sure Dr. Hawks would be happy to answer any questions. So we can see the chat now. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type your questions into chat, and we can, and then Dr. Hawks can answer your questions.
The web address for the fossil scans, it's morphosource.org. Okay, yeah, so the question is, what kinds of metadata are used to keep track of files in MorphoSource? In MorphoSource, it's actually a database setup, and you'll see if you go to the site, you'll see that metadata that are include images of the scans so that you can see what you're getting as you're browsing through them. It includes data on the methods used to do the scans, which includes the device that's used to gather the data. it's a site that's capable of archiving. We use laser scan data on the site, but we also have CT scan data that we use, and it's capable of archiving multimodal data. It's also capable of archiving things like the species that's represented, the fossil site, the level, all kinds of details about this. In our case, a lot of that metadata is superfluous because we're looking at a couple of very delimited of sampling localities. But for broader scale paleontological enterprises, if you browse through data that's available on the site, you'll see that there are all kinds of fossil sites, and many of them, that element of what species are you looking at here and what level is it from, that sort of stuff is all very important. And all of that is included in the site. How do people find out about the Google Hangout schedule? When we are working underground, we're announcing that through National Geographic, and you will be able to follow. We're usually keeping track of what's going on and announcing stuff as it goes on our Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, John Hawks, or Lee Berger, Prof. Lee Berger on Twitter, you usually are able to keep track of everything that we're doing. Okay, in addition to eLife, are you considering publishing articles in other open access journals? We have already published a number of articles in various open access journals. Nature Communications, Scientific Reports, the South African Journal of Science is an open access journal that we publish quite a lot of our research in. Also, the journal ACRL Anthropology is a journal that we have a number of upcoming articles coming out in. For us, there is a trade-off. And I want to be really candid about that because we have all kinds of early career researchers on our team. And they are the PIs for their own parts of this project, right? So we have a team that's responsible for, right now, describing the dental remains, the teeth of Homo Naledi. And they're making their early careers on describing these fossils. They have real pressures in their lives, right? These are people who are going up for tenure in a couple of years, and they have senior colleagues in their departments who are saying to them, oh, you can't publish everything open access. You have to publish some of these things in a well-respected journal, like the Journal of Human Evolution. For those of us who are in the leadership of the team, we have to weigh that, right? The fact is, we want our people to have career success, and that is a really important aspect of the project. And when they have people who are telling them, oh, you've got to publish in this field-specific journal, we take that very seriously. We don't want to constrain people from publishing in the forum that they're going to be recognized in career terms for what they've done. But at the same time, we're making it more and more acceptable and expected that the public will be able to read what we do. Anytime we as a team publish one of our things in a closed access journal, we receive all kinds of very critical commentary from the public that says, I can't read this. I've been following the work that you're doing and I can't get this. What's going on here? And we get a lot of kickback from that. And that's appropriate, right? Because we want to see the world change to where people are able to read these things. It is always a trade-off for us because, as you know, many open access journals charge a lot of money, and as a South African-led project, we have a very limited budget for this kind of thing. We are able to work with some journals to waive those open access fees, but it is nonetheless always a trade-off of, if we're publishing this open access, what are we spending on it, where is this money coming from, and what are we not funding that we would have done otherwise because we're funding this open access. It's a changing landscape right now. We are committed to be at the leadership of it, and we're going to stay that way. But I'll tell you that there are, from somebody who's been open access as a booster for now more than a dozen years, I'll say that running a project where we have those real life decisions of, here's somebody who wants to get tenure in 2 years, and they're telling us that this journal doesn't work for them. Here's government, and we're telling them, we're publishing in this sort of non-conventional way, and here are the benefits of this. And we've been very fortunate that government and university in South Africa are full on behind this. But in fact, there are many of our young colleagues who are working in America and in Europe who are the biggest resistors to this. Okay, let me just, do I see a time when open access? I think open access, in my field, right, the question is there a time when open access publishing will be taken more seriously by the scientific community? In my field, I would say that anthropology trails other fields, right? I do a lot of work in genetics. In genetics, this is right now viewed as serious, you know. Publishing in PLOS Biology, publishing in eLife, these are serious publications. These are the kinds of places you want to publish. It is true that nature and science in particular, and Cell, continue to have a disproportionate impact on people's careers. But it is no longer the case that publishing in, let's say, genetics or publishing in current biology have any special cachet over publishing in eLife or publishing in PLOS Biology or PLOS Genetics, right? I'd say that there's a solid tier of open access journals that are seen as being, you know, the premier journals in these fields. In anthropology, that's not the case. People in anthropology right now, they are very strongly influenced by Nature Science, PNAS, and by Journal of Human Evolution, Current Anthropology. Now, these sorts of journals are seen as being the career-making journals. And what's ironic about that is that the kind of citations that you receive for publishing in those field-specific journals are actually very low compared to what we get publishing in open access journals. I think there's a real sense to which in anthropology, people read from the right. You know, it's like going into a restaurant and seeing the menu. People are reading, oh, you published in this journal, it must be important, instead of actually looking and say, you know, you published this 3 years ago, and look, you've got 150 citations. You know, and I would say that the forefront of our field, you know, we're certainly leading the way toward the recognition that it's what you do that matters and not where you publish it. And we have made a lot of progress in this. But I will say that changing the generation of scientists who are right now writing tenure letters for people is going to be a while. And it takes courage and leadership from us and people like us to change that culture. And I think that culture is changing. I think that really is changing now. Okay. Let's talk about, yes, the question is, what about a massive open course? This is very interesting, right? Because I taught a course 4 years ago. I was running 4 years ago right now. And it was actually that course that drove my involvement in some of this research in South Africa. When we did the MOOC here, our goal was to do something that you could never do in a classroom. And we had 40,000 students enrolled, as many of the MOOCs did in those days. And our goal was, if the students were not going to be in the classroom, what we would do was we would go places and bring the students virtually into the field. And my experience in teaching that was just incredible. We went to Israel, we went to South Africa, we went to Ethiopia, we went to Gibraltar, we went to famous field sites where we had made discoveries in the past, and we interviewed scientists who were working there. We showed people what it was like in the field. We did, the basics of anthropology from a field direction, and it was amazing. The students were able to follow my graduate students in their field work over the summer. They got experiences of what it's like to be on a field school and work at Olduvai Gorge. What is it like to work at Swartkrans in South Africa? That was really one of a kind. The benefits of doing that were so wonderful, and so you say, well, why aren't you doing this all the time, right? Why isn't this the way we teach? I would say that we are teaching this way in our online courses here at the University of Wisconsin, right? My online summer course, that's what it is. We are traveling in the field and actually doing the teaching from the field and bring the field to the students wherever they are. The economics of teaching a MOOC, that's what has never quite worked out. Where do the resources come from to make this available to 30,000 students and to have the teaching assistants and the administrators that are necessary to run this in a way that students aren't abusing each other on the forums? They aren't, and I'll say that we didn't have a lot of serious problems with this, but at the same time we put a lot of staff into making sure that this was well done, and that staff time amounted to a budget of more than $120,000 to run this course. We spent more than $30,000 with me going around the world filming things and doing the course delivery. So it was an amazing experience, but one that educated us a lot on how to do that kind of education, and we've directed those resources into making effective education for our on-campus students. I'll say that we talk quite a lot about doing more of this sort of thing as a project, and what we want to do is to make it work in Africa, and that means going to the next level of technology. That means being able to get people on their phones, because the phone is the internet tool in Africa, right? And that means that we need to be able to get out at a level that right now no online courses are doing. We need to make this easy for people, make it easier for people on the devices that they have, make it multilingual, or at least able to be used multilingually, and those are aspects that we're looking to push on the African format, the African context. Okay, lots of researchers are interested in public engagement citizen science, but this is not always recognized by tenure committees. Building on the question of the open access, do you see a time when academic culture will value engagement in citizen science? What needs to happen for this to change? The thing that's very difficult, I've been involved in various kinds of public engagement my entire career. And the thing that's difficult about it is that the effort that you put into it is not readily translated into academic reward system, right? The academic reward system values those things that are perceived to be very difficult to get. The first thing that we value is money. It's difficult to get money. And if you're getting money from a grant agency, we all recognize it's hard to get money, and so we recognize people who get money. It's difficult to publish articles, and so publishing articles matters. And so then the journals that it's perceived to be difficult to publish in have a bonus, right? You publish in Science or Nature, it's perceived to be very difficult. So we have this ranking, and the ranking is not based on the effort that you put in. The ranking is based on the perception of the difficulty of what you've accomplished. And that's actually appropriate. I've always believed that with public engagement, we need to be more results-oriented. We need to show that we're doing things that are difficult to do, and that when we have an accomplishment, it's actually measurable in ways that are clear that it's difficult. Some of the most important public engagement work that I do is on documentary productions. Right? The fact is I collaborate with 2 or 3 documentary productions a year in terms of consulting to check the scientific accuracy, in terms of filming, answering questions on film, those sorts of things. it's very hard. There are very few scientists who are engaged in that realm, and the impact of it is very large. You know, hundreds of thousands of people will view a documentary that we do. So that's something that's very measurable. It makes a difference. When we do Google Hangouts with classrooms from the site, that's actually having a very small impact compared to a lot of things that we might be doing. We're dedicated to it and engage in it because it gives us a multi-level ability to train our staff, our underground people, in that kind of outreach. And we're pushing the technology to make it possible to do more. So that when we do a Facebook Live and we have 30,000 people, that actually makes a huge difference. That's hitting people in a way that we've never as a field been able to hit people before. So for me, what makes public engagement matter, what will cause science and universities to take this seriously, is when the impacts are measurable and large. And that is where we're going, right? That's what we do. That's why we're a high-profile project in engagement, is because we have these measurable impacts. It's important to our ability to work in South Africa that we engage government in this way, that we engage landowners. So I think that's the big thing. There's a lot of people that put a lot of effort into engaging the public, and the effort is honestly not generating the payoff that I think it could do if we were able to share information about how to do this better and how to have more of an impact.
So this is Tom. I think we are at time, so maybe we could take like maybe one more question. And I think Lois hasn't kicked us out of the room yet, so we could probably go for a little bit longer. So it looks like we just got another question. And I'll just my mic here.
Great. I'll take this question, and then we'll sign off. The last question, going back to Morphosource, does it include other data about the entire project or just the bones? It depends. There are some projects that archive a lot of information on Morphosource. Our project does not archive its central information set on Morphosource. We archive the specimens that we're sharing with the public, but there is a facility, and some projects you'll see on there do share a lot of information. In our case, we want people to make sure that they're citing the publications that we have, the open access publications, are sharing that essential information about the site. So we're channeling it through the academic side as opposed to channeling it through the database side. All right, I want to just reiterate, I really appreciate all of your participation, all of you signing on to hear what we had to say, and it's been a lot of fun for me. I certainly am available by email, and I'd love to interact with anybody that has additional questions or interest in this area, and I really appreciate everybody's engagement in this.
Yes, it looks like lots of thank yous are coming in, and I just want to thank Dr. Hawks myself again. So thank you so much. It was very interesting, and I was really looking forward to this. And thanks to everyone again for coming. And I'm sure that if there are more questions, you could either email Dr. Hawks yourself or email them, send your emails to me, and I'll forward them right to Dr. Hawks. He's one of our stars of the anthropology department, I think, and so I'm always very interested to hear about everything he's doing. So thank you again very much.
Okay.